Good evening and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Tuesday, July 24th, 2012. I'm Tony Paniagua. We often hear about the demise of civil conversation in the United States, especially when it comes to divisive disagreements between different political factions. However, some groups are trying to improve positive communication and dialogue. And there's a national organization based in Tucson that recently hired its first executive director, even though it was established more than a year ago. Andrea Kelly has an interview about the National Institute for Civil Discourse.
Joining us in the studio is Carolyn Lukensmeyer, the new executive director of the National Institute on Civil Discourse. Thank you.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, Andrea.
So you are just starting this month as the new director. Can you give us your background, a little information about what you did before you started with the Institute?
I'd be happy to do that. I think what's most important for your viewers to know and your listeners to know is that I'm a passionate advocate for Jeffersonian democracy. And 17 years ago, I founded an organization called America Speaks, and the whole idea was to make of the people, by the people, for the people real again. Special interests have really closed out ordinary people in most public policy discussions. So America Speaks used a model where we brought together very large numbers of demographically representative Americans to talk about a policy issue and to find out what they think collectively. Today, mostly politicians get their information about the American public from polls. It has a very important place in our democracy, but that's always only an individual's opinion. If you're really going to make a shift in the debt and deficit, on immigration, the big issues facing the country, we need to understand what collectively do Americans think.
Okay, and that brought you into the National Institute on Civil Discourse, where you're just starting now. Again, that was founded after the January 8th shootings here in Tucson in 2011. So how are you going to use that experience to focus on national civil discourse?
Well, I was very attracted to the National Institute because I think we're at a moment in political discourse in the United States that is it's the most dysfunctional, it's the most negative in my entire adult lifetime. Many people are saying that we have not seen this much viciousness, even bordering on violence, as happened with the shooting with Representative Giffords, since pre-Civil War. And one of the things that I know, because I've spent 17 years working in the grassroots, listening to ordinary Americans, most Americans really want to solve the problems facing our country, and they are quite capable of coming together and listening to each other across their diverse views and making decisions together. Now, that's not what we see on the nightly news. That's not what's mostly reported. We're starting the mantra that the public is as polarized as are our politicians in Washington. But, you know, Andrew, you just have to stop and think. Human beings are social beings. People are social beings. They respond to the signals and the structures that they're put in. And most of the time in our public spaces today, the images that people see are their elected officials, leaders of institutions, attacking each other's characters, being uncivil with each other. So American people start to think, well, you know, if that's what they're doing, maybe that's the side of this that I should emphasize. But in our experience, when you really bring people together in a safe environment and you give them real information. We ran a project at America Speaks on debt and deficit in 2010, where we had 3,500 Americans all across the country that we gave them the task, $1.2 trillion to be cut from the deficit by 2025. We had Tea Party people and MoveOn.org people at the same tables. They were completely civil with each other, and they solved the problem.
Now, the former director of the Institute, Brenton Millward, is also the director of the University of Arizona School of Government. So he's been doing a couple of jobs at a time.
Yes.
I think he's looking forward to having a new full-time director. And you've referred to this as 2.0, or maybe he's referred to it as 2.0. So what is next for the Institute, and what are you working on?
Well, I think the way that I'm looking at this in terms of a vision for the Institute, we have the moral authority of what came out of what happened to Gabby Giffords at a time when political discourse is completely off track. And we need to have three audiences for our work. We need to work with members of Congress directly, and our big initiative there is called Congressional Conversations. We've developed a coalition with 7 other organizations in Washington, D.C., and our plan is in January and February, after the election is over, to actually create working sessions with key congressional committees so that the majority party and the minority party are actually dialoguing with each other, actually developing relationships again. We also really have to target the public. And a current initiative that we've been working on there, we just got the results from a poll we put in the field about 6 weeks ago. We actually targeted the voting public, people who are voting. And we went for moderate Democrats, Republicans, and independents. And we asked them a set of questions about how they are thinking about public discourse, how they're thinking about how their politicians are behaving. And although we are not finished, a couple of highlights I think your audience would be really interested in. One of the questions we ask is, do Americans reject the idea that hostile exchanges are unavoidable in politics? 88% of them disagreed with that. As you know, in poll data, 88% is a huge number. A second question we asked them was, are you ashamed of the way elected officials are acting when they're dealing with these big issues like debt and deficit and immigration? 81% of Americans, whether they were a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, said they were ashamed. And the most important data is, we then asked them at the end, does this lead you to want to stop being engaged? And at least for these already engaged voters, at the level of 40%, they picked the highest level of engagement that they could possibly pick, a scale of 1 to 10. And the mean was 8.2. So we've got to deal still with people who are unengaged, but that's pretty telling data in terms of how Americans are thinking about the dysfunction in our political discourse.
Great. Well, I'm sure we'll hear more from you as you continue with the Institute. Carolyn Lukensmeyer, Director of National Institute on Civil Discourse, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Andrea. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Some merchants in Tucson are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to the multi-million-dollar modern streetcar project, which will travel on tracks for about 4 miles in the city. After months of street closures, parking restrictions, and temporary fencing, the coast is much clearer for potential customers on a stretch of 4th Avenue. Luis Carrion has an update.
Construction for the modern streetcar, also known as the Sunlink line, continues along the 4-mile route that stretches from the University of Arizona Medical Center through downtown Tucson and to the Mercado District on the west side of I-10. The project is the source of ongoing disruptions for residents and businesses along the route, and it's not expected to be completed until sometime in the fall of 2013. However, progress is being made, and the streets in front of these businesses were recently freed from the construction fencing that restricted access for more than 4 months.
Fences came down Friday, and it was really neat to see. There are people out walking their dogs and playing with kids in the street and generally just, springing on that new asphalt feel.
Definitely very excited about the fence going down. We're very, very, I think, blessed that our section was done first.
As soon as they took off all the fence, things have changed, we noticed a lot more people.
The consensus among businesses on this stretch of 4th Avenue is that having the fence come down has provided a boost in business. The months spent behind the restrictive chain-link fencing took a toll, and many wondered if they would be able to survive.
Construction itself probably rendered about a 30% reduction in business while it was underway. And we've been using this time to develop. So we're actually adding another whole kitchen station. General thought throughout Tucson was that there wasn't much parking, and so that people didn't come down just on a whim. They made plans, they still made reservations, and they came in with large parties, but it wasn't sort of a spontaneous, it was like, ooh, we just found ourselves on 4th Avenue.
This is what the fence art was like. Isn't that tight? It's so nice. So every day I would go out and put it in zip ties and put it in front of them, and it looked awesome. I'm like, why didn't you do this before? I had 4 months of this stuff, Yeah. This one's, I think, my favorite. The last 3 weeks have been really, really poor. Like, it's been really bad. I mean, that would be, you could not sustain that too long, as far as I could with my business.
Now, honestly speaking, like month of June, I think it's the first time, while I'm here in the business for past 5 years, first time while my total monthly transaction was way below than my monthly rent and utilities, way below. That was the first time.
While these businesses may be benefiting from the completion of this stage of the project, they know that the end is still many months away. And South 4th Avenue is only now beginning their time behind the chain link walls.
I'm hoping that the impact is a little bit less on South 4th Avenue. I think they have a little more street parking off of 4th Avenue.
You know, don't give up. Don't try not to show up. You have to suit up and show up and try to squeeze it for all it's worth. You can't just say, oh, well, I'm not going to show up because nobody's going to show up. You know what I mean? Don't give up hope, and it's almost done.
I think it's a good investment, and let's hope that it pays off.
Proponents of the light rail project say Sunlink will drive economic growth and generate more public-private partnerships. Meanwhile, construction continues throughout the entire length of the light rail line, and this southern stretch of 4th Avenue is expected to be fenced off for the next 4 months.
If you are looking for a cool respite from the summer heat and humidity, you may want to check out one of your local libraries, which offer countless opportunities for hours of education and entertainment. Our next guest is very familiar with what it takes to keep these operations running smoothly throughout the year. Melinda Cervantes is the new director of the Pima County Public Library District. She recently moved here from California, but she has also worked in Arizona. Melinda, thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
So tell us a bit about when did you hear that this position was going to open, and why did you decide to apply for the job in Tucson?
Well, I learned of the opening, as most people do, over the internet, but I had just been visiting with family in Tucson over the holidays, and it wasn't until I got back to my office that I realized that I had an opportunity to apply. And so I grabbed that, and the position closed, interviews in February, and I was hired in March and started in May.
So let's talk about your previous job in Santa Clara County, California. You were there since 2002. How do the two systems compare between California and here in Arizona?
Sure. Pima County Public Library District is larger. There's about twice as many people to serve. It is a county-wide system, and so in that regard, we cover many more, literally miles of area, but also a significant and diverse population. Santa Clara County Library District is in the San Jose area. Silicon Valley is very prominent there. And the Santa Clara County Library District was only a portion of the county. So we had 9 libraries there, whereas here we have 27 branch libraries and a main library.
And how have you spent your first few weeks here, going around shaking hands, introducing yourself? What's a typical day like, if there's such a thing?
Well, I have spent a lot of time meeting people. I've spent some time on the campus here at the University of Arizona. I've met the director of the graduate library program called Searles, and I've also met the dean of libraries, Carla Stoffel. I'm out in the community connecting with a lot of our support groups like the Friends of the Library Foundation, Literacy Connects, and the YMCA, another partner. And mostly, though, I have 2 or 3 branch libraries that I visit every single week so that I can get to know the over 500 employees in the library.
And what is the status of libraries? We were speaking prior to this interview about, in today's world of modern technology, computers and so on, some people might make the assumptions that libraries are not getting as many people as they used to. What's the real case?
We're actually busier than ever. We have been increasing usage by roughly 6 to 8% a year in most public libraries. In this down economy, we have found a lot of folks have come back to the library. They've let go of their internet service at home. They've stopped buying books. They're borrowing again, and they come to socialize and attend programs. We have programs for kids and families alike, so we're finding many more people returning. And I don't want to forget the job help service that Pima County Public Library offers is significant. We work in conjunction with One Stop and a lot of other departments, and so we have significant training available if you're seeking a job.
And what about a topic that everybody talks about when speaking of government? How are the finances for the library system here locally?
Well, the funding for the Pima County Library District is very similar to what I had worked in previously in Santa Clara County Library. We're funded with property tax revenues that come through the county and through your tax bill when you pay annually. And while the tax revenues have been down The Pima County Board of Supervisors and leadership with County Administrator Chuck Huckleberry and his staff have been very good at managing the programs and looking for ways to consolidate and find efficiencies. So Pima County Public Library is stable with its funding. It's not growing yet, but we hope to see that happen in the next few years as the economy improves.
And as you have been able to become a little bit more familiar with the district here, what are some of the things that you would like to focus on? If you had that magic wand to do some things, what would you like to see done?
Well, there are a few areas that we're working on. One, we're really advancing the technology that's available in the libraries now. We're bringing new PCs. About a third of our PCs will have Windows 7, and Office, MS Office 2010, which is absolutely necessary. Some of the older Windows XP not being supported. We're introducing what's called a Discovery Search Catalog, which will allow people to move through the library's catalog and look for books and other resources in a way that's kind of like Amazon or some of the other companies out there, where you can rate and rank and comment. You may keep a list of what you're reading. It's a bit of social networking. You can find other people with similar interests and share information. Watch for that before the end of the year. The other thing, we have a huge demand for speed and power, I guess is the term I want to use, on the broadband network. So we're introducing much more fiber network. We're trying to segregate the internet pipes so that more people have really consistent high-speed use. And then we have a new mobile app coming out. Watch for that by the end of summer. And it's from a company called Boopsy. And they've been working with libraries now for a couple of years. In fact, the library that I left actually piloted. We were the beta tester for Boopsy. So I know it's a good product. I hope that with our library strategic plan and the new community impact plan, that we will further our services for people of all ages. We have a heavy focus on literacy. We have a heavy focus on job help, and also on families and children. So we'll continue to offer those, as well as take our programs into areas where we don't currently have a lot of library services.
All right. Well, Melinda Cervantes, the new director of the Pima County Public Library District, thank you for being here and good luck.
Thank you so much.
Southern Arizona is known for its vibrant art scene, and tonight we continue our discussion with some people who were recently honored by the Tucson-Pima Arts Council for their commitment to the arts. In the category of Small Business Partner, the winner is Joanne Schneider, who owns Bentley's House of Coffee and Tea. With her is performing artist Logan Phillips, who was the host of Tucson's Youth Poetry Slam last year. Joanne and Logan, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Let's begin with you, Joe. So how did a coffee shop become so involved in poetry and other artistic endeavors?
Well, when we started the coffee house almost 30 years ago, I think it was just following the tradition of what coffee houses do, and that is be a place and a venue for artists. So we started with artists on the walls. So every month we have changing artists that put up their work with no commission taken out of their sales. And so we've been doing that for almost 30 years, every month. And then we started with poetry, and we hooked up with the Lighthouse Poetry Slam, I think it was called back then, and then with the Ocotillo Poetry people. And we've been doing that essentially almost nonstop for 30 years.
All right, we'll come back to that, and I'll ask you a few questions about that. But Logan, when did you hear about what was going on over at Bentley's House of Coffee and Tea, and then why did you decide to get involved?
Well, at the time, I didn't even live in Tucson. I was a touring poet and artist, and I was traveling through Tucson and was invited to perform at the regular Poetry Slam in Tucson, which was at Bentley's House of Coffee and Tea. And it was a great crowd, great venue. And then later, when I moved to Tucson in 2010, the Poetry Slam hadn't moved venues, which is a very rare thing for Poetry Slam, to find a venue that fits it so well and to stay, to find a place that's committed to the arts in that way.
And then, so what about this poetry? Why is it something that is so important to you from a business perspective and from an artistic perspective as well?
Well, I think it was more an artistic perspective. And I think that we knew that this was just something that should be done here. It was the venue for it. We had the space. We had the sound system. We were doing open mics at the same time. So on Friday nights, we had an open mic that happens for musicians. And it was just segued right into the poetry pretty easily. So I don't think it really was a financial decision as much as it just seemed like the right thing to do. We had the space. We had the sound system. And it's what coffee houses are supposed to do. So.
And on that topic, Logan, so many businesses are not that interested in supporting the arts. Why do you think it's important that people like Joe and others do so?
Well, I really think it's critical for the health of the community overall. I think that's what it gets to, is the arts and, poetry in general may sound like kind of an esoteric topic to people, or something that's not maybe necessarily relevant, maybe in the business sphere or in the larger social sphere. But I really think that when we have true dialogue through the literary arts and through performance, it creates a more humane city. And I think that that's something, especially after what happened here in Tucson in 2011, the emphasis on open dialogue and through civic dialogue. I think that Poetry Slam, which is poetry competitions, help open a door to the wider literary arts in which some of those conversations can start. And without a business or without space for that dialogue to happen, it's not going to happen. And so we need allies in the community who work in the non-for-profit sector, in the for-profit sector, in public sector, to be able to see the commonalities and come together. And that's something that I think Bentley's has been really great about doing.
And Joe, what did you think about being nominated, first of all, and then winning in the category of small business partner?
Well, to be honest with you, I was a little overwhelmed. In all these years, we've not been nominated for anything like this. So I was pretty overwhelmed and really grateful to Logan for nominating us. And we found out pretty much just a couple days before it was happening that we were nominated, and we went, and we're really grateful that we won. It was an honor. It's an honor, of course.
Because you've been doing this for 30 years. Obviously,
Almost
you were not
30 years.
seeking a Lumie award at some point, but it's nice to get that recognition.
It's nice to be recognized by a community that you love. Yes, no question about it.
And Logan, so this has grown. It started in 2006, the Poetry Slams. And so where are we now with these poet readings?
Well, it's been basically unbroken. As Joe said, poetry's been in that venue since the beginning, and the slam competitions started in 2006. They were started by Teresa Driver, Lindsay Miller, and Maya Asher with the Poetry Slam that they started. And that's continuing in town as well. And then in 2010, a new program started called the Tucson Youth Poetry Slam, which is designed specifically for young people ages 9 to 19 to be able to find a room full of people who are interested in hearing what they have to say. So as a program and as an artist, we're not so interested in dictating content or anything of that nature, but we're interested in creating space for youth voice to speak. Because they're speaking, it's a matter of listening. And so that requires space, and that requires resources. And the Tucson Youth Poetry Slam now is held every third Saturday. The next one is going to be on August 18th, and it's open to anyone who wants to come check it out. And we'll be there every third Saturday with a good partner like Bentley's. We know that we won't have to worry about, finding a new home for a while.
So it must be pretty nice, Joe, to sit there in the coffee shop or, the business, the establishment, and hear this active art going on at the same time.
It's pretty incredible because the room just fills up, and it is actually alive, and especially having kids there. I think it's so wonderful to have a venue where kids can be. There's no alcohol, so I think it's a perfect fit for kids. And it is a lot of movement and a lot of energy, and it's very fun. It has been great for us, and I'm glad to know great for you too.
And Logan, what about the stereotypes that, young people, they're not doing anything artistic anymore, they don't really care about these topics, and yet you have so much interest in poetry?
I'd say come to the slam. Yeah. Come to the slam and listen. I really think that's, I'm even cognizant now of not speaking too much for them because, the youth aren't leaders of tomorrow, they're leaders right now. And all these stereotypes, negative stereotypes surrounding youth, that's ignorance, basically. It's usually those are really put forth by people who haven't taken the time to try to listen, and that's something that the Tucson Youth Poetry Slam is great about doing, is creating a venue that's fun to be able to come and listen to. I mean, it's irreverent. We have people yelling and screaming. This isn't the sort of poetry reading where everyone's sitting quietly. It's a really good time, and so I think that the things that they're talking about, the ethnic studies ban and other things that are going on in Tucson, these are conversations that need to be had, and they're finding an artistic way to say them, and then from there going into the further craft of poetry as a doorway into the wider literary arts. And it's always great seeing the baristas and everybody at Bentley's who's actually listening and who's actually engaged and excited for it to happen, which isn't always the case in other venues as well.
All right, and Joe, you recently bought another business. What do you foresee doing with that when it comes to the artistic efforts, endeavors?
Well, we do music 5 nights a week, and actually more than that. We have late night music, and so I get to, again, be privileged enough to be involved with this artistic community, which Tucson is just an amazing place for the arts. And so being able to have a venue to provide people to come and listen to music and for musicians to be able to perform I feel lucky, really. I feel lucky.
Well, okay. Well, thank you very much, Joanne Schneider and Logan Phillips. Good luck to both of you, and we'll see where next year takes us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much.
In today's modern world of smartphones and other common devices, many newspapers are struggling around the nation. However, some continue to survive, and the saying, hot off the presses, is still relevant. It's tonight's video postcard. You can get more news and information on our website, azpm.org. To comment on any story you saw tonight, click on it online and go to the bottom. We can also be reached via Facebook and Twitter. Coming up tomorrow night, we'll hear about some of the struggles being faced by veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan and learn about a program that is helping them. Also, fasting for Ramadan. It's one of the most important holidays for Muslims. I'm Tony Paniagua. From all of us at Arizona Public Media, have a great night.